What's cracking, people? It's your baby mama's favorite cousin, cousin T-Taw, and today we have a very, very special show for you to this evening. And really, I can't say too much or enough about today's guest. This conversation is going to be one for the books. Before we really get into this discussion, I want to give some background on today's guest. Today's guest is, of course, none other than the illustrious Dr. Hasan Johnson. And some background before we really get into the conversation includes the following. Dr. Johnson is a professor of Africana Studies at CSU Fresno. He is the originator of the term Black masculinism. We'll definitely be getting into that today. He is the author of the book, which of course we have right here. Get your copy, right? The Black Masculinist Turn. He is the founder of the Institute for Black Male Studies, father, author, speaker, artist, and Afrofuturist. Everybody, welcome to the stage, none other than Dr. Hasan Johnson.
What's good?
Great to have you. Happy Father's Day once again.
Yeah, man. Happy Father's Day. It's good to be here.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for taking your time out of, a busy day. I'm sure people are showing their love from all over.
Oh, yeah, man. Oh, yeah.
This is quite a busy weekend considering the cultural calendar. Juneteenth, Father's Day, and the unofficial kickoff. Actually, today is the summer solstice, right? So this is the first day of summer. So you've got a wonderful. It is no, absolutely. So, with respect to your time, I really just wanted to dive into a bunch of subjects that I have been curious about. Now, I'm sure you've seen the conversation that myself and the master teacher BGS Edmore had regarding your book, which everybody can get their copy. Definitely go to Amazon and get your copy of the Black Masculinist Turn. Now, the first thing I want to ask before we unpack that is, how long have you been in men-centric spaces on YouTube?
It might have been 17 or 18. I was kind of brought in by Obsidian.
Okay. Yeah.
What initially kind of happened is I kind of slowly made my way toward, Black male-centric material, research, so on and so forth. And I found in the academy, there weren't a lot of people I could talk to about the things I wanted to talk about. There was like a very thin hallway of what you were expected to talk about if you wanted to talk about Black males. And it was something that, couldn't offend the sensibilities of feminists or whatever. So it was it was real isolated in terms of where you could go. And I had questions that, questions that I wasn't looking for one person to answer. I was looking for a dialogue. So, because I think orally, so I wanted to have some kind of conversation and I couldn't. I went to conferences, I did, different things of that nature. And so at a certain point, I just said, you know what? I'm going to create a blog and basically I'm going to plant my flag and say, this is what I stand for. This is what I am. So I did it. And a while later, Obsidian just wrote in the comments of one of my little blog pieces, and he invited me to check out, his show. And at that time, everybody would just come together because there were so few, you know what I mean? Right. So when I would go to Obsidian show, Valdez was there, BGS was there, Alan Roger Curry was there. There was just all these guys. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I didn't know any of them, but, Obsidian just kind of looked at me. He was like, yeah, you need to come over here. And it ended up being the very conversation I was looking for. And the thing and it was more than I was looking for, actually, because, one of the things I always talk about with YouTube, this is the biggest cross section of brothers I have ever seen in my life. Absolutely. I mean, you got, there's just everybody. Like I tell people, I know hobosexuals that own nothing but a smartphone and couch surf from place to place. And then I've spoken to university presidents, CEOs of banks, and they're all on the same panels in the same comment sections talking about their experiences. You know what I mean? So I was like, this is better as far as, especially in terms of research. I'm never going to come across a cross section like this. that are in constant dialogue with one another, disagreeing, agreeing, coming up with new subjects, moving in all kinds of directions unpredictably, and none of it is controlled. um I mean, the closest thing you could talk about control is the platforms we use, but short of that, the academy, you could lose your job.
Mm,
All kinds of serious repercussions. On social media, people have there's not that same kind of regulation. So it's coming from a very raw place where men are talking about their experiences, and most of the time, especially at that time, and you remember this, everybody was kind of had their identities, kind of
yes,
covered. So,
yes,
folks were coming straight from the hip about whatever was going on with them, and and they didn't have to worry about losing their jobs because of it. And so it was one of the most honest conversations I'd ever run across with black men. Sometimes it made me uncomfortable. Sometimes I was laughing my ass off. Sometimes I shed a tear. Sometimes I was jumping up and down, excited. But because it was so real and so honest.
yes.
So yeah, that's how I got here.
Listen, the establishment didn't know what had been uncorked in these spaces, and you talk about that in your book. That's one of the many things that I appreciated when I went through your book. Now, this book was written as a textbook, correct? Or what sort of format did you produce this book?
Yeah, it was the last book I needed to advance to full professorship, so it had to still have a foot in the academy, and the other half of it was just a conversation to brothers. So the structure of it was one, that the academy could acknowledge, and of course where it was, who it was published through. But the conversation itself, I was directing at black men. And so that's kind of why it's structured the way it is. And it was also part of a book series where you had to have a 50,000 word cap. So trust me when I tell you, I have like 3 books on my hard drive I've never published. So that one is really it's short. Now, if you look at the book sideways, it's deceptively thin. And
Right.
when you read it, it's a lot more there than you would think because as thin as it is, but it's capped at 50,000 words because the series that invited me were only doing 50,000 words. That was part of the entire series. And you also have to realize I stopped publishing, but
Mm.
that was one of the reasons I came to YouTube. BGS convinced me to start a channel, and he kind of mentored me on how to use the tech and stuff to get online and whatever. But I had stopped publishing because the things I was interested in writing about, publishers were denying me because they were worried about offending feminists. And
Wow.
I just
Wow.
yeah, man, it got bad. Like I would I pulled together charts using government data, and I would have editors that wanted to rewrite my charts so they didn't hurt people's feelings.
Isn't
And
that
so
something? That Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to say that was so I pulled out of publishing, and then I came into YouTube, and ironically enough, the same publishers that wouldn't publish my work were now asking me to write a book or asking me to come speak. So it was an interesting kind of twist.
Amazing, amazing, and we're all the more better for it. Staying with the conversation about your book, you mentioned some YouTube or a prominent YouTube personality, that we all know have fought with, and when we talk about the you mentioned the conversations that happened in the 17s, 18s, and 19s. Those were raw, contentious spaces to be in. But in that crucible and out of the crucible, and I know you mentioned this in your book, came a lot of revelations, a lot of truths that were revealed. And like you mentioned, the cross section of backgrounds, statuses, uh, demographics, localities,
Hmm.
globally
Hmm.
is unmatched. I'm not sure that it can ever be replicated. Can you mention, or would you mind relating, um, probably one of your most impactful Kevin Samuels stories? I know we all have them, uh, and just briefly for this moment, would you mind recounting probably one of your most impactful Kevin Samuels moments?
Oh man. Let me see. You mean just in terms of dealing with his work or personally between him and I?
Yeah, either one. We have our own personal Kevin Samuel stories. I mean, I've had conversations with him. I didn't get the
Mhm.
chance to meet him in person, but yeah,
Yeah.
if you have one, that'd be great.
Well, let me see. I'll do both. I'll do one of both, and they'll be very very quick. As
Mhm.
far as kind of personally, every now and again he would call me, and we would have a
Mhm.
conversation about some of the research, because he would always kind of lead with data. And he did much of his own research. I never gave him a bunch of stuff that set him on a direction. We would just have brief conversations about a few things, and I had talked to him about some experiences that my son was going through
Mm.
at that time. Nothing egregious, but I was just telling him that boys as young as 13, 14 were not only listening to the stuff we were doing online in the manosphere, but they were also giving us their own experiences. And my son and his group at that time, going into high school, they were already going into monkhood at 13 or
Mm.
14 years old. They were checking out. And I understood why, because I asked him about it a couple times, and he would tell me stories. He'd be like, "Man, he and his friends would break down each race of girls." Because I'm in Fresno, so I'm in Central
Mhm.
California, so we got a bit of everything, but it's mostly Latino. That's the majority
Oh,
population. So
okay.
he would tell us how he and his friends deal with Latina, white, and black women, girls. And he went through each one, and he said, how they felt about it. And he got to black girls, and he was like, "Oh, we don't do that, Dad." I said, "What do you?"
Wow.
I said, "What do you mean you don't do it?" He said, "No, we don't deal with them." I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Because they're hostile as hell." He said, "They'll talk about you, they'll embarrass you, and they'll go toe to toe and start fights with you." And he said, "And that's when they like you, Dad." And I was like, but what blew me away about it wasn't that I'd never heard that. It was because it was almost word for word what my friends and I talked about at 13. We just didn't go as far as into monkhood. I mean, we were on a mission to get laid as long as young as we could. That was
Absolutely.
Gen X. That's what we were. We didn't even know what we were trying to get, and we were trying to get it. You know what I mean?
These are facts.
Whereas my son's generation was like, why? You know what I mean? They had a whole different
Wow.
response. So I told Kevin this, and Kevin, I actually wrote down the show, just to give to my son. But Kevin actually brought up my son and talked about it, almost in a way, to kind of give him some advice. And my son knows who Kevin is, and of course, but I'm like, son, every now and again I'll remind you. I said, "Do you know that Kevin actually carved out a portion of his show to talk to you directly?" And he was just like, "Really?" So I have to reintroduce it. So
Wow.
I really appreciated that, that he took the time to do that. In terms of his actual show and his work, one of the things, now I'm a PK. So my father, who just passed away in February, it was a pastor, retired pastor,
Mhm. Mhm.
and a Baptist, in Tennessee. And
Mm.
so I didn't grow up with him. I lived with him for several years at different points. Super church, and if anybody any of you come from a church family, 7 days a week there's something. Bible
Mhm.
study, boys quiet. There was just so many damn things. We were always up at the church every 5 minutes, and whatnot. So I grew up under that. And Kevin was the first person I saw, that he did a show talking about feminism in the black church.
Mm.
And,
Okay.
and he was talking about the way it had been absorbed, not only into the sermons where you had pastors preaching to an audience of a congregation of mostly women.
Right.
He talked about the black men leaving the church. See, I had kind of pulled away from the church, and I was entertained in the mosque. I was going through my own kind of experience. I didn't know that black men in large numbers had pulled out of
Mm.
different branches of the Christian church. So so when he's talking about these things, and then he's explaining the feminism in the church and the attitude of women and Christian women and how they'd kind of morphed, he was morphed Christianity with feminism. He was the first person I heard talk about that, and I remember listening to the show. And I sent it to my father, and I called my dad, and I said, "Are you familiar with this?" And my dad was like, "Oh, hell yeah." I was like, "Well, why didn't you
Mm.
tell me this before?" you
Right.
know, and we ended up having this, 4-hour conversation on it that was sparked by Kevin. But, so there were a lot of pastors and ministers that knew a lot of this, but I didn't know. I didn't know this had happened. So, one of the things that really I appreciated about Kevin was that he was willing to do that. And it really helped put some things in line in terms of some of my experiences. Cause I was like, oh, so that's why that happened that way. Cause I didn't realize how far feminism had gotten in terms of that. So, yeah, those are the kind of
Yeah.
things that really, I appreciated about him.
Yeah, that is tremendous. And if you happen to have that show episode handy, drop it, or
Mhm.
cite it in the chat. That'd be wonderful. That would be a wonderful reference for those who are listening. Speaking of which, make sure that you're liking, subscribing, and sharing this conversation with someone who you know can benefit from the information. Also, be sure to bless the good doctor's work at the bottom of the screen is scrolling his information, as well as
Yeah.
go ahead and log on to his website, his personal website, that is also linked in the description. So many
Thank you.
directions that we can go with this. But like I said, out of respect for your time, I will try to stay with a format. Um, so it's because it's not often that you get the opportunity to speak with a modern day academic philosopher. Now
Wow.
we talk about philosophy on my chats and in these spaces, the mating, dating, and relating space. Okay, so
Hmm.
let's unpack a few things, if we would, good doctor. In terms of content like myself. Now, I am a seduction coach, a former exotic entertainer, as you know. So
Hmm.
the experience that I bring to this space has to do with engaging with the raw energy, the raw desire that is exhibited in spaces outside of the public arena, where people, not just women, but just people in general, get to truly express their innermost desires, their innermost, fantasies.
Hmm.
So that's sort of the perspective that I come with in having conversations in this space. That's my sort of contribution to this space.
Mm.
Now, in your opinion, okay, what is your position on the current state of the mating, dating, and relating landscape? Now, you don't have to
Mm.
put them together. You can, pick and choose
Yeah,
however you like.
that's a lot. That's a lot. I think the lane I've tried to carve for myself, because the way I see the work that we're all doing, there are so many different areas to be covered. And I was talking
Right,
about this the other day on one of the. I started doing daily shows in March, and so I was talking about this on one of my daily shows. There was so much time where not only did Black men not have a major platform, not to just talk to the world, but to even dialogue with one another, right? Because women had a platform, via Oprah and
right,
whatnot. They were doing movies, telling the world we were monsters. We didn't have a way to really communicate with ourselves on any large scale basis. I mean, you were lucky if you had to, a ball, met up with some of your friends or watched the game, or you went to a barber shop or something of that nature. We didn't have a platform. So in the last 10 to 15 years, black men have been taking advantage of social media and started comparing notes. So the way I see our conversations is there's so much to be covered. Not no one of us can cover all of it. Because we're also making up for years where we couldn't communicate. So there's so many different issues and experiences and whatnot. The lane I've kind of chosen in regard to relationships, dating and mating and what's going on is to look at the policy
mm,
influences that shape behavior. So if you talk about, welfare, if you talk about policy around, subsidizing women in ways that black men didn't find themselves subsidized, these are things that change behavior over time, right?
right,
And the attitudes and perspectives about men change. If she's getting money from the state and the state is requiring that the man shouldn't be in the house for the period of time that policy was in action, and there was a long period of time afterward when the man in the house rule was no longer technically legal, but it was still kind of in practice.
right.
Well, after you see three generations of women in your family leading households, making decisions, and passing down information from grandmother to mother to daughter to granddaughter about when you get tired of them, get rid of them, get divorced, hit them up for child support, possibly alimony. When that method becomes, crystallized in the conversation, in the culture of black women, these policies shape behavior. They shape worldview and outlook, and it has an ongoing effect because now you got generations of girls who've never seen a strong man in a household on a consistent basis leading. If anything,
Mm,
that's become an offensive idea, for many women. So I try to look at it in terms of how policy has stepped into this area, because there's so many men that covers from so many areas. I'm not really the one to give dating advice. I've had my years of doing that, but
Mhm.
I'm not going to profess to be, especially in 2026, up on what's going on now. I mean, I was
Yeah.
married for 11 years. When I came out of my marriage, I didn't know what the hell was going on. Things had changed so quick. So I would never stand up here
Mhm.
now and give people marital advice or relationship advice. I'm like, you need to go talk to the brothers that are skilled in those areas. I
Mhm.
just talk about the influence of policy because I want people to understand that this didn't just fall out of the sky. These
Right.
perspectives that you're running into at every woman you date, and you can almost hear the word for word same conversations. I don't need a man, independent, whatever it may be. It's almost like there was a script passed around, and and
Yes.
and we all heard it come out of their mouths, but we're like, where the hell did this script come from?
Right. No, absolutely.
I don't know how old you are. I'm
Uh,
51.
46.
46. Okay. So 1980s was the first time
Mhm.
I heard you need to make six figures to date me. Now, mind
Wow.
you, I started high school in 88. So
Okay.
I was hearing this as a freshman in high school. And
Mm.
that became the standard. Now I'm hearing it from freshmen in college who are telling the guys sitting next to them in class, you need to make six figures to date me.
Wow.
I'm like, you're 17, you don't have a pot to piss in, you've never had a job, nobody in your
Right.
family makes six figures. You might even be the first or second to go to college. Y'all don't have nothing, and you're telling the guy sitting next to you who's just as broke as you are that he's unworthy of dating you until he makes six figures.
Yes. Isn't that
But
something?
go ahead.
Yes. No, you're making wonderful points, and those statements, those sort of phrases, they echo throughout demographics, across demographic lines. But
Mhm.
what's interesting, and I have, and you bring up a very interesting question to me. That 17, 18-year-old young lady who's sitting in a college uh, class, she has access to a smartphone, whereas she can, put a profile up on various apps. What is it? Syncing arrangements or
Yeah. Yep.
OF or
Yep.
and she could presumably, you know, garner multiple five and even six figure,
Mhm.
payouts herself.
Mhm.
So, do you see that as a way to offset that requirement that a man bring, or even a young man bring,
You
six
mean
figures to the dynamic, or does it compound it?
you mean that she can make six figures herself? Is that what you
Yes,
mean? Oh,
yes.
no, you know what I tend to find is that even when women do make that, they still require it of the men they date. They
Mhm,
require he make what they make, and really they want more. They
mm,
want more. And the thing I've also noticed with that is she will immediately expect him to start paying her bills. Even if she makes more, if she dates someone that makes less, it's still an expectation. So it's not logical. It doesn't make a lot of sense. You're
right.
young, you're making good money, but you've already shrunk your pool to this group of men that make more than you, and then you want them to pay for everything. And it's gotten to the point where like when I was in the 80s, my mother would tell men she was dating that they had about 2 weeks to start
Mm,
paying her bills. And if they didn't start paying her bills within 2 weeks, she dropped them. She figured that, and her logic was they don't really love me. I've
mm,
I've heard women on social media now requiring it at the first date. The
okay.
$1,100 first dates, and which if you have the means, that may not be anything. But when you talk about the average guy and the average girl,
Mhm.
it becomes a problem. Because look, man, if our great grandmothers and grandmothers had those kind of requirements, none of us would be here right now. It's
These are
just
facts.
it doesn't make any sense. But
And I love how you just framed that entire sort of snapshot of a perspective from a policy standpoint, from the numbers, and from the rhetoric coming from a lot of women. This is where we step in. This is where the guys from my section, when we talk about, dating coaches, body game coaches, seduction
mhm,
coaches,
mhm,
whereas so before I go into that, let me ask you a question. Now, this is off the academic record. This is out of the the scholarship space.
mhm.
Do you believe even one word that comes out of women's mouth? You don't have to answer. You don't have to answer. Don't worry about it. I set you up.
What I've learned is when it's in their interest, it'll be as honest as it's useful to be.
Listen. So I say that to say that in my world, we don't listen to women. We observe their behavior, and we can appreciate the science of cooperation, the sort of human behavior of the dance of the engagement of the masculine and feminine, and in that women will say a lot of things online, and it's a performance. It's basically performative modern feminists or post-feminists, however you want to frame it. It's a performance where they believe they have to say these things in order to be seen as a part of the group. That groupthink, that beehive mentality. Right. However, when you get them in spaces, when you get them in a situation whereas you know who you are as a man, you know the value that you bring to a space, your masculine light, which I refer to as your presence, your wisdom, and your leadership. Yes, they are definitely looking for leadership. That puts them in their feminine position, which I refer to as the feminine mystique. It has to do with her allure, which is her outer and inner beauty, right? That persona that drills beneath that sheen of makeup and cosmetics and that true person underneath, her intuition. Because so I don't know what your position is on
Well, I think what you just explained is why almost every woman I've heard requiring a man of six figures, who's already had children, by the way, never has children from men that have the six figures she's requiring. I think that's what you just explained. Yes. It's something that's said, it's something that's thrown at us, but when you actually look at her life, it's like, how many of these men have you been with before?
Yes. And that's why I started that with, how much of what they say do you actually believe? And you mentioned, you touched upon the homosexual dynamic, right? That's a thing. That's a real thing. Now, that person, that gentleman, that guy, he knows something that the average man does not know. He has some insight into how women feel. Notice I didn't say think. How women feel in terms of the interaction and the engagement. Jill Scott, and I'll say this because I really want to get to this other point. She's famous for saying, if a man can't tell me what to do, he can't tell me what to do. But if a man can tell me what to do,
he can tell me what to do.
There you go. Now, and that is gospel. That is so true. Those are facts. It's about seeing beyond the rhetoric. It's about seeing beyond the narratives that they weave. This sort of fantastical image of, to get right to who she is. I know you, Keisha. I know you, Aisha. I know you, Benita. I know you, right? And being able to call to that person, that actual person that's behind the sort of social media avatar. Now, that's just a touching briefly onto that, because I wanted to make sure we get some of that into the conversation. Those who are watching, make sure that you like, share, subscribe. I know you're already sub to Dr. T's channel. Forward this conversation to someone that you know can benefit from this convo, this ism, as it were. Make sure that you show your support to Dr. T's work by hollering at that cash app that's scrolling at the bottom of your screen right now. But definitely make sure that you're liked and subscribe. Let's get into some fun stuff. Let's get into some interesting things, right? Now, like I said, having the opportunity to speak with a living, modern academic philosopher, I got to ask you these questions. Now, I'm starting this portion of the conversation with this quote by from Alan Watts. If you can be talked out of being who you are, you deserve it. Okay?
That's a cold line right there.
Absolutely. That's the setup. That's the setup for what comes next. Now, I have to ask you, as a philosopher, who is your favorite philosopher?
I thought about that because I was actually a philosophy major, and I didn't really have one. I think the closest I had were kind of the political ones because I grew up. My father was a Panther, so I,
Mm,
so I grew up kind of moving in that direction, and so for me, some of my favorites were like the Fred Hamptons, the Kwame
hmm
Ture's,
hmm
Malcolm, of course, was
hmm
huge. And there was a guy, named Jacob Carruthers, who did a lot of work, on the ancient African component, and so I really dug his work. But those are the ones that come to mind. Um, but as far as philosophy, but I'm still a little blown away that you'd introduced me as a philosopher. So I'm highly, I appreciate it. I was just blown away. I was like, wow, I never thought of it like that.
In these spots, that's why you got your own theme music. You're the cool doctor,
He said
right? People, if they want to get in touch with the cool scholar, they
Oh,
holler at
wow.
Dr. T. Now, I asked you that question. Obviously, any question that I ask is, of course, a setup for something else that's
Mhm,
coming. We,
mhm,
we we hear about the Western philosophical tradition, and obviously in the academy, in order to pass, requisite courses on your path towards whatever degree field you're going
mhm,
into, you got to study these guys, right?
mhm,
Um, I say that to contrast for those who are listening. I've got three prominent figures in the Western philosophical tradition: Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle,
mhm.
and sort of a summation of what comes out of the Western tradition of philosophy: reason, rationalism, and reductivism. All right, the last one is a jab, of course. Now, tell me what you think about these philosophers.
Oh, well, definitely Tommy would be one of my favorites, without question, and that's mainly because I've had a chance to literally break bread and have these conversations about the published material, and then about the stuff under the table that you don't talk about in public. So I got nothing but love for Tommy. Du Bois, Douglas, various heroes of mine, who I still don't think have gotten their proper due.
Right.
And I think things are still, becoming, people are still becoming slowly aware about different dynamics. Like even me, I just learned Du Bois was sexually violated when he
Mm,
by a woman that he
okay.
was he was renting an apartment from. I didn't know
Mhm.
that, and I've read Du Bois in undergrad. I mean, you know what I mean?
Right.
We've all heard of Du Bois for years, but I'm just finding this out like a month ago.
Wow.
You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And so I present these figures here as
Hmm.
a lead-in to what I refer to, and that is being referred to in a lot of spaces as the foundational Renaissance.
Mm,
Speaking to what you just mentioned, new information,
hmm.
more conversations, more expanded and expansive conversations about not only historical figures but modern figures who are moving the conversation forward about culture, about politics, about what it means to identify as ethnically, what all of these things mean and how they come together to present a movement. And so, of course, I had to include Dr. Curry because he mentions you in his book.
Mm.
Okay. Now, listen, everybody, these are two books that you have to have in
Oh,
your
wow.
conversation. Uh, I always say, even having published my own book, of course, the Seduction Scriptures, I rate mine an 8 out of 8, 8 out of 10. I
Mm.
don't I don't normally write books 10 out of 10. The Man Out is a 10 out of 10,
Yes, sir.
with,
Yes, sir.
without question, without
Yes, sir.
debate.
Yes, sir.
Um, One simply needs to open the pages, and it's so rich and it's so dense. I had to have like three dictionaries, and I had to have a thesaurus. I had to have, reference work, and it was at first.
Yeah.
So as an author and a publisher, right? you have your own voice, you have a signature style, you have a cadence, you have a
Mhm.
flow of how how you present information, how you establish a premise, a point, argument, and reference works. This work, this
Yeah.
material is so jam packed.
Yeah.
I It goes beyond being an argument. I call it um, an indictment with
Mhm.
exhibits. Okay, by the end of the book, so I've purchased this a few times for different people, but this is my
Right.
personal copy. By the end of the book, I've got over 180 indictments. Okay,
Mm. Mm.
in terms of what is presented in this resource.
Can I share something about that
Please,
real
absolutely,
quick?
absolutely.
The first time I saw that, Tommy sent me the entire book on Word, Microsoft Word. I still have it.
Mhm.
And this, obviously before he published it, but he sent it to me, and his question was, "Do you think this is okay?" You know, what, he was like, "What changes would you make?" Now, mind you, I hadn't opened it yet, so I'm like, "All right, well, I'll take a look and let you know." I opened up the first chapter, man, and my jaw was on the floor. I never I was like, I didn't even know you were allowed to write like that. Like I was like,
Right.
not in terms of the complexity, but in terms of the arguments. I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. So I read it, and then he was like, "Well, do you recommend any changes?" And I almost cussed him out. I was like, don't you ever ask anybody no shit like that again. This is brilliant. You know what I mean? And so that was the one thing. The second thing, the only reason that book got published, he hates when I say this, but it's true. The only reason
Mm.
that book got published, the publishers didn't understand what he was saying.
Wow. Come on.
He had a he
Come
had a
on.
he had a white woman editor or whatnot, who was overseeing the book. And she would call him sometimes and she'd be like, "Are you sure this statistic is true?" And he would just send her a bunch of charts and whatnot. And he never misrepresented himself. He didn't lie about anything, but he was telling me these stories, and I'm like, "So what you're saying is she doesn't understand what you're doing." And she also, going back to your statement about the current renaissance, she doesn't understand the moment. So
Right.
she approved of the book, even though she didn't really understand what he was arguing. And I was saying, she just greenlit something that she has no idea the impact it's going to have.
This is a
Yeah.
blockbuster for anybody who can afford 3 copies. Go ahead and get 3 copies. Shout out to Tristan
Yeah.
Fitness.
Yep.
We appreciate that for the scholarship.
Hey.
And he also references Ron O'Neill, right?
Yeah.
Ron Neal in this book. And
Mhm.
when you, and so for people who read, right, you can hear the voices of contributors. And there are sections of this book where I'm like, I can tell that he was in dialogue with a contemporary and he's asking and going back and forth, should I say this? And then there's a point where it just says, fuck it, I'm gonna say it. I'm like, the
Yeah.
references, I
Yeah.
mean, this is a complete book. This document is so chock full of how to present an argument, how to present evidence to support it, how to establish bearings, a north star throughout, stay consistent. I mean, he came for everybody. All right, precision.
Brother, I know. Well, I won't say I know a lot. I know a good portion of the under the table about that book. And there are some things I promised I wouldn't say again because I think I make him blush. But I'll tell you this: that brother
Mhm.
wrote that book in a month.
Get out! Are you serious? You've got to be kidding me. See. Okay, so again, this deserves its own conversation, and I would be honored, to have that conversation with you at another time or another space. But the reason why I put him here among the luminaries is because I don't use the word genius lightly. Okay,
Oh, please. Yep. Yep.
Kanye West is a genius. Okay,
Hmm.
for his abilities, and I noticed that you speak on hip hop.
Hmm.
Okay, don't think that we're not going to touch on that. Okay, in a little bit, but uh, I don't use that term lightly, especially when we talk about modern thinkers who not only have the ability to frame a position, frame an argument, and provide counterpoints. So the conversation about certain social media personalities and their credentials, has been floating around, right? Dr. Cheyenne Bryant have been floating around certain spaces recently. For those who don't know, in this book, okay, Dr. Curry unpacks the dissertations of prominent feminist writers, okay, and just lays bare the hollowness of their arguments. Just insane. There are runs that he goes on in this book that are inspired. I mean, it feels, and we have comparable sort of literary luminaries to a Shakespearean run, right? I'm sure you're familiar with Shakespearean runs where, the monologue just keeps going and it just, holds its own and it keeps on going, right? Mm-hmm. There are literary runs in this book that are incomparable, okay? The references to Baldwin, the references, to so many Hollow Renaissance writers, thinkers, philosophers, Dr. Hugh P. Newton, and modern, thinkers and philosophers, the supporting information and evidence that's presented there. So I would have never even imagined that this was completed in a month, but it makes sense. And it confirms the level of genius, okay, that this gentleman possesses. Anybody who's watched a YouTube video where he is in Edinburgh or somewhere else giving a speech or even having a debate about any subject, his ability to call a reference work, just from memory on the spot is incredible. Like you want to talk about not running circles around somebody, not talking circles, but thinking circles around people. It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah. And he's extremely gracious. He spoke to a class of mine. This is probably a couple years before he wrote The Man Not. And I was having a very difficult class where it became a kind of mini war in the class as far as the feminism was concerned. And so I invited in, when I get to the gender portion of the class, I invited one woman in to talk about a certain area. And then I brought Tommy in. And when I tell you, I have never seen over Zoom, just a spanking that took place across the room. I was sitting in the corner, just mind blown. And as a matter of fact, I put that on YouTube. I got to find it, but it is up. With the whole conversation with him in this class. And it was a class full of feminists that were trying to get me fired and trying to argue with me. And then they got to the point where they were saying, you must be making this stuff up, because the stuff that we were doing, wasn't commonly known. So they just assumed I was lying. So I brought Tommy in, and they tried to have that same kind of, angle with him. And it was a spanking of epic proportions. It was just, wow. But I mean, that's the way he is. He's real gracious. He's real, humble, and he will rip you a new asshole and walk away with a smile on his face. And it's just like,
listen. Shout out.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Shout out to the good doctor. We appreciate that. Mike, salute to you. You get a visit from the ASP Holy Ghost. There you go. He says, Chicago is in the house. Is there any way to get in contact with you, Dr. Hasan? Go ahead.
I tried to put my email in the comment section right under his comment, but it wouldn't go through. Just Hasan.Johnson@gmail. Hit me up.
Okay. And I have Dr. T's website information at the top of the description. So just go to the description, and his information is right there. No, absolutely. I would love to further unpack this book. My favorite section, and I know your favorite section is the entire book, but my favorite section of the Man Not has to do with necromancy, right?
Mm.
Where he mentions, he says, and I'm not going to misquote him. To have a conversation with a black man is to be in conversation with death. Okay, he said it says necromancy, the crisis of speaking to the dead. It is extremely powerful, extremely powerful, but it speaks to something that we're going to touch upon in just a moment when we move further into this conversation. If anybody was wondering what I refer to as the Renaissance, the modern Renaissance, the foundational Renaissance, this is just a very brief sort of description of what's happening, political, obviously social, cultural, lineage-based progression, right? And conversations that are happening that have not been had before. Dr. Johnson, this is a question that we often ask, right, in the community, right? Who is your favorite, if you have a favorite, Harlem Renaissance author? Who do you like to read?
Actually, hold on, because I had to write some of these down. I was like, this brother is not playing. And you had me thinking about some things that I had never really thought about straight out. So I appreciated that. Let me see, because that was actually a kind of harder question to answer than I thought it would be. But what I came to, there was two people that came to mind. But technically, people would argue one of them doesn't belong there, right? Coming up, long before I started dealing, with black men as my primary research focus, I was drawn to Zora Neale. And I was drawn to Zora Neale Hurston, but what drew me to her was she was basically in fiction. She was archiving black towns, independent black towns. And so there was something about that I really fell in love with. And she was even, framing, manners of speech that are no longer in existence. So her books became a little bit of an archive of that. So I kind of dug her work like in undergrad, and I kind of got into that. The second one is a little unconventional, but it's Thurgood Marshall. And now most people think of Thurgood Marshall as an old man on the Supreme Court. But if you know anything about Marshall, he went to high school with Langston Hughes. Those were all his contemporaries. He was tight with them. They made fun of each other, laughed at each other, competed with each other. So he was around and in that energy, that energy you're identifying in terms of this FBA Renaissance. He was there. And he was in that.
Right.
Only difference was they went the artistic route. He went the legal route. And I'm not saying one is better than the other because I'm an artist, or at least I used to be. But I appreciated something. There was something about, young Thurgood that got into me, into my heart, that I always appreciated about him. So when you asked that question, I was like, he's not technically considered part of it, but you can't tell me we get the Thurgood Marshall we get without the Harlem Renaissance, without those relationships, and I fundamentally don't believe he would be the same person without them. So I count him there informally,
Brilliant. I mean, it's much like you said, this space being a cross-section of so many histories, so many backgrounds, so many demographic sort of positions within the current or the modern landscape. Now, for those who are listening or watching, I did not receive Dr. Johnson's answers, okay, to this. It just so happens that Zora is my favorite Harlem Renaissance writer now, for a few reasons. A couple that the good doctor has already mentioned. The language. I am, listen. I love reading. I love writing. I am a jazz musician. I've played jazz trumpet for more than 35 years. Okay.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, I taught music. Yeah, I taught music for about 10 years, and I did private lessons for a while. There you go. Look, how about it? I
got to get with you.
Listen, that's a whole other conversation when we talk about the histories, when we talk about what goes into the music and the art form. But it is a language. It is a language in and of itself. and this is one of the reasons why I can appreciate Zora so much. She was unapologetically herself. A lot of her unpublished works are now being
Uh,
presented.
mhm,
Letters, thoughts, ideas. Um, you know how they're bringing out Jean-Michel Basquiat's sketchbooks and scribbles and things that he may have tossed to the side, whatever. Those
mhm,
are coming up for auction.
mhm,
Tens of thousands of dollars into that. So similar things are happening to a lot of Harlem Renaissance writers, sort of thoughts and notes and ideas. But this book is a particular treasure or gem for me. It's called Hitting a Straight Line with a Crooked Stick, right? We call it hitting a straight lick with a crooked stick, right? In our spaces. And it's a collection of her short stories. One of the
mhm,
stories, because people try to reframe sort of how these works were presented and sort of try to superimpose the modern lens or the modern academic lens, which is heavy feminist leaning, onto works like this. And so the forward had that sort of icing on it. But when you get into it, she is all about how much she loves her people. You want to talk about Collinsville, you want to talk about Edensville, right, in Florida, where
mhm,
she.
mhm,
So there is a character beyond. So she loved men. She loved black men so much that she has like superheroes in here. Okay, the back room is one of the most outstanding stories. I mean, the description, the way that she describes a man being strong, tall, shoulders 4 feet wide. Could wrestle a bear with his bare hands.
mhm,
Her descriptions of the Great Migration and going back and forth during
mhm,
that time, because it was so fresh and so new at that time, being in New York, being in Chicago, um, folks from Chicago coming down south and being celebrities. Oh my gosh, you from Chicago?
mhm.
Talk that Chicago talk. It was amazing stories in the way that she illustrated the characters and how it captured the excitement of the interplay between city life or urban life and down south living. Brilliant.
I gotta give you props on that because a lot of people, especially since the 1980s, only really ran across her and her work through black feminists.
Mm,
Because Oprah's platform and a number of the women that she worked with, they really were the ones that kind of, went to. I think it was Alice Walker.
mhm.
That whole crew. They kind of resurrected her, but in so doing, they presented her to the world as this black feminist superhero. And I'm not saying that she wasn't inspirational to black women, or I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is once it was introduced that way, she was read that way. So I haven't actually heard very many people talk about the men she wrote about in the way you have, because most of the conversation is about what she's done for and written about women. You know what I mean? So I appreciate your description because she predated those kind of movements. She contributed to them, in one fashion, but she was doing other things. And
Yeah.
and a lot of those other things kind of get downplayed in
Yes.
order to present her as this feminist superhero.
Right. Right. I mean, she loved black people,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just generationally, from children, teenagers. She wrote about these coming of age instances and stories that were touching, heartbreaking. These were soap operas. I mean,
Mhm.
and in order to frame a soap opera effectively,
Right.
you can't have this sort of dolt of the male figure where you have this amazing superwoman as the female figure. No, the men were capable, and they span the range, and the women were human. They had their mystical powers, and so one of the things, and I won't run on too far with this, okay, because I can go all day. um, One of the things that she made sure that she kept in there, or in throughout her writings, was the how to resolve. How does it resolve? there were never stories or instances or narrations that left the reader hanging. There were problems presented, there were issues that came up,
Hmm.
and there were solutions. And usually the solution came in the form of forgiveness. Usually the solution came in the form of understanding, alliance, compromise, and the greater good of the whole, which is something that I promote in terms of when we talk about, I always say, people already know what I'm about to say. Women love players because a player is always going to put everybody involved in the best position to win. And so, real briefly, another one is, of course, Lorraine Hansberry. Now, why I include Lorraine Hansberry here is because there's a special insight at the gym that I go to. Her niece goes to that gym. Okay,
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, one of her nieces is a competitive bodybuilder,
What?
and yes,
Wow.
I'll send you the Instagram later. But
Wow.
he was so kind as to sign my copy of Raise It in the Sun. So
Nice.
so this is not some far off, distant, history. We're not performing archaeology. This is a living presence that we have with us right now. Now, to progress this, like I said, for the sake of time, we spoke about the modern arena of the dating, and relating landscape. We got that out the way. Now, I'm going to throw a couple concepts out at you. Okay.
Mm,
This first one here has to do with the hood. Now,
okay.
did you grow up in Tennessee? Like, where are you from? Like,
No,
where did you?
no. I was born in Brooklyn and I was raised in the Northern Californias, San Jose, Sunnyvale, East Palo Alto, Oakland. So I'm born on the East Coast in Brooklyn, New York, Flatbush, raised in Northern California.
Copy that. So have you? Would you say that over the course of your development, your developmental years, or at all, were you ever exposed to the so-called hood? Meaning, to be very specific, the urban spaces in which the descendants of the Great Migration were funneled into, in terms of red line areas, economically depressed areas,
Hmm.
historically. Okay, so have you ever had contact, or did you ever live in a
Yeah.
hood?
Most of my family on the East and the West Coast were in the hood. The only break from that was my mother, because we didn't have any money. She was a single mother by choice, really, and she worked like secretary jobs that she never made more than $30,000 in her life. So that meant we moved every couple of years. But my mother's guiding principle was, if I can't afford, the schools to send my children to that will elevate them, she decided to like rent apartments in middle class white areas, working to
Mm,
middle class white areas. So I went to school with, it's Northern California. So Samoans, Mexicans, white folk,
mm,
it was all the schools were always a mix of all of that, but they were in working class to middle class white areas. So the public school was considered slightly elevated from what you'd have gotten the heart of the hood as far as that.
right.
But my family were in Oakland, East Palo Alto, Brooklyn, South Central. So when I went to visit family, it was always hood.
Okay. Now that's another conversation that I'm always interested in having, because I absolutely came up in the hood. Okay, South Side, low end Chicago,
Hmm.
projects. You name it, it was there in the structure. Now, I only present this just to get your academic opinion or position on this as an idea. Okay, as the word hood, or the term hood, being uh, sort of a veil. Are you familiar with what a veil is in our culture, especially when we
Hmm.
talk about the folk spiritual practices? If someone's born with a veil, that means that they have, usually, okay, a veil at birth means that you have a piece of the placenta covering your eyes. Okay, so some of the right. So as a child is being birthed, there's some aspect of the placenta still covering the child's face that needs to be removed. But
Mm,
the ancestors, old folks, refer to that as being born with a veil. And basically, the concept of the veil means that your true essence and your gifts are hidden from the world,
mm,
so that you can work. You can work the benefits of those gifts in secret. Sort of the
mm,
nature of the underground, right? Underground
mhm,
werewolf, underground hip hop, underground spaces, in order to foster, uh,
mhm,
you know, valuable elements of the culture outside of the gaze and the appropriation of the external.
mm.
So, can you? What are your thoughts on the concept of the hood being
Oh, as a veil itself?
veil? Yes, as a
Yeah,
veil for like an ecosystem that fosters the focus or the locus of FBA cultural and creative expressions.
yeah. I see what you're saying. It makes sense. I mean, you're talking about not only a people who were greatly underestimated and dismissed. We were basically the way they kind of structured this. We were supposed to fail. We were purposely underdeveloped, especially along economic terms, and
Mhm.
ignored. And and so we were, in many respects, we were considered nothing but labor.
Mhm.
And it was a good period of time where you worked until death, and that was the expectation of you. So for that people to produce despite what others didn't believe we were capable of, for that group of people to be able to change the world. I mean, hell, by the time you get to the middle of the 20th century, you have countries around the world that are inspired by this 11% population that has no wealth, and yet the world is paying attention to what we have to say. So I see what you're saying, and it makes sense.
Fantastic. So, that being said, I can go first, or you can go first. Because for those who have, first of all of those who are within the sound of our voices, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Forward this conversation to someone who you know can benefit from this ism. Make sure you blessed the good doctor's work via the Cash App that's scrolling at the bottom of your screen right now. And click on the website that takes you to the wealth of media that he has available to you via his platforms. Now, either you can go first or I can go first. I would love to have you go first because you are the guest. What?
Okay.
Look, the
Well,
setup.
I don't know where we're going, but
I love it. What is your top five? What are your top five
oh, don't do
hip
that.
hop art? Listen. I prepared you. You had time
Yeah.
now.
That was actually that was harder than I expected it to be. One of the reasons I got hired at Fresno State was to teach hip hop.
Mm,
So I'd been teaching since 1998, but my first full-time position, I was principally hired because I taught hip hop. My
mm.
first book was on hip hop. So, but interestingly enough, that was a hard question to answer, and I don't think I wasn't happy with my answer because there were way too many ties. I
Mm.
think I got the first three kind of clean, and then the next like seven or eight were all like it was too close for me to judge. And then after that, I started identifying different things that you didn't ask, and you kind of made a mess of my night that last night, man. It was
I
you know.
appreciate that.
So I'll answer the question, but I'll just say it's a mess. That's all I can
Well,
tell you. My list is a
so
mess.
if you want to go top 10, that's totally fine. I only go top five because I do know that for a lot of people that's a very important
Yeah,
question,
yeah.
especially in our culture, because
Mhm,
we love to debate the GOAT for a reason. We value, so when we're talking about a value system and principles, we value the superlative. If
mhm,
you are the best, you are the realist, you are an honest person, you seek justice, right?
mhm.
You are elevated in our culture and debated. No, he didn't do this. Well, remember that he did that? He said that and then well,
Yep. I remember when I
compatibility.
remember when fist fights would jump off when that conversation it would start okay, and an hour, 2 hours later, two people are rolling around the floor. So it
Yes,
could go everywhere.
because at the end of those conversations, those who were successfully positioned as the GOAT, as the top whatever,
Mhm.
They determine the direction of the culture. And
Mhm.
as you said, a culture that is exported globally,
Right.
where there are university classes held in Amsterdam, held in China, okay, held all over the planet on how to perform what
Yep.
comes naturally to us. Listen,
Look,
listen. So whenever
let,
you're
let,
ready,
let,
go
me,
ahead with your
let me tell you this.
please.
One of the gifts about being a professor teaching hip hop, we didn't have much money at Fresno State. So I didn't have 50,000 to bring the newest artist to come speak. What I would get was roughly about $5,000 a year to bring a guest out. Now,
Mhm.
luckily, I didn't know this, but the golden era artists, that was good.
Mm.
And I was always blessed with somebody that had a contact, and it was always along the lines of, well, this artist is going to be in California at such and such time. Drop him
Mm.
five, he'll pop up here for a day on his way to whatever his next concert is in California. So I brought X Clan a couple of times
Wow.
to Fresno
Wow.
State. I brought Chuck D about a month before he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Um, I brought Cool Mo D. I brought Curtis Blow. I brought
Mm.
KRS-One. And I'm
Wow.
telling you, man, it's from listening to their cassettes back in the day to having these cats sitting in my living room. X Clan stayed at my house for almost a week because
Wow.
they didn't want to wait for the university to mail them a check. They wanted me to get it and hand it to
Right,
them.
right, right. Oh, okay. I
So they
thought y'all were chopping it up, going through the hit. No, no, no.
Well, we
Pay me my
were, but
money.
they were like, no, we not leaving until so. But we had a ball. I wasn't
Yeah.
being threatened, but it was a whole different thing to go from listening to your group and then walking into your living room and they boots is kicked off, feet kicked up, and we watching a movie chilling. It was just, it was surreal.
Yes.
So I was blessed to kind of
Cash.
have those experiences. But I'll say, okay, first and foremost, I'm gonna work backward on this list. I'm gonna work backward. So
I'm sorry. Before you get started, can I do one thing?
go ahead.
For those who are listening and who are not a part of the culture, but who love our culture, thank you so much. We appreciate the support. When we have these conversations, we always cite the criterion for who our top five is. We do it with everybody. Uh, the greatest basketball player, the greatest football player, the greatest whatever. So for hip hop artists, criterion: proliferation, lyricism, creativity, flow, punchlines, prowess, consciousness, authority, cultural impact. Go for it.
Well, I'm like I said, I'm working backwards. So two of the things I had to recognize is there were some artists that I like, but really what I liked more about them was that they were part of a larger project. And what I mean by
Mm.
that is if you take someone like Jay Dilla, right,
Mm-hmm.
as a producer, I loved Jay
Brilliant.
Dilla's work. I liked some of the artists he worked with, but what I liked most was when he worked with those artists. So from Slum Village to Common, there's a lot of
Yes.
tracks. So I call it, the Jay Dilla Project is one of those things I had to name. But because of my age, I have to say before there was Jay Dilla, there was DJ Premier.
Yes.
So there were artists that he did that I didn't like as much when they weren't working with him. But when they worked with him, especially at that certain time period in the early to mid 90s, it was gold. So from the Group Home to J. Rue the Damager to Gangstar, what I consider the DJ Premier projects, I have to shout them out. But they're too big. When you say, well, who's your favorite? I can't just say,
Yeah.
Guru, because it was more than
Yes.
Guru. It was the work with
Yes.
Premiere. You know what I mean? So I had to name those
Yes.
projects. Let me see. There were a lot of, I don't even want to say ties. There were just a lot of artists I didn't know how to characterize or list, I should say. So, the X Clans, of course, I enjoyed Pac and Biggie. I really liked Lil Brother, group named Binary Star. I used to really
Okay.
dig EPMD, man. Come on.
Yes. EPMD. Yes.
You know, um, I dig Paris. I don't know if a lot of y'all are familiar with Paris, but I've always liked Paris's work. Now, where the list starts to get tight is when you start talking about Tribe Called Quest,
Uh
when
oh.
you
Watch
start
out.
talking about Public Enemy,
Yes.
KRS.
Of course.
That's when the list is starting to come inward. Big Daddy Kane, whatnot. I loved a lot of those artists. My personal, I guess I could say I could at least say in my top four. So there was Public Enemy, there was KRS, I love MF Doom.
Okay,
I
fair
will
enough.
always love
Fair enough.
MF Doom.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember when he first came out. I remember Peach Fuzz. I remember the reinvention, and MF Doom blew my mind. So I got nothing but love for Doom. But with my top, now you have to understand how biased I am. I named my son not directly his name, but it was heavily inspired. My
Oh,
son's name is Rakim.
wow.
Not
Oh,
Rakim, but Rakim. But let's not play around. The
yeah.
inspiration was Rakim. The reason I went that direction, I wrote a whole little piece when he was born. I have to find it. It was online. I can't find it now. But the whole idea around it is really not just the artist himself; it's what he meant.
Mm-hmm.
Rakim reinvented the rhyme structure. And
Okay.
by that, what he did, as far as what I valued, was not only did he restructure how hip hop was performed, how it was, he brought into it the deep thought. Like if you look at Kumo D's book of top 50 rappers, he talks about Rakim in a way I've never heard before. He said, I was rating rappers, and he said, I went to a Rakim concert. And he said it was hard to rate how well the concert went because he said it was one of the quietest concerts he's ever been to. So the audience didn't make any noise, which
Right.
is not what you see at a hip hop concert. But he said, when I paid attention to the audience, they were mouthing along every single word. So it
Right.
wasn't that they were bored. It wasn't that they were disconnected. He had triggered something in them as far as deep thought that he hadn't seen with it. I mean, KRS was brilliant. I'm not saying I'm not taking away from anyone else, but with Rakim, it was a level of analysis. It was, and so he had people kind of keyed in. And what I started to really think about was, and this is why I named my son in this direction. I said Rakim changed. It was kind of a transformative figure. And to me, that meant that, I wanted my son. I wanted to bless him with this notion that he is a transformative fixture, not only in my life and my family's life, but he will be at one point, even to himself. So Rakim was, for me, that transformative figure. I mean, this cat was running around tracks, and he was writing his rhyme the same way you would play a saxophone. And he was working out his diaphragm while running on track, spitting his lines. I'd never seen anything like that. None of us had. And so for me, I appreciate current Rakim, but to be honest with you, my favorite is Lyrics of Fury era, Follow the Leader era Rakim. Anybody who's not heard Lyrics of Fury, it's on YouTube. There's about 100 different people that young cats that have, I forget what they call it. They do reaction videos.
Yes.
So they pulled up Lyrics of Fury and did reactions to it. Go listen to Lyrics of Fury.
Indeed.
That's me. That's my goat.
Okay. Appreciate. Oh, listen. Oh man. And so one of the beautiful things about these conversations that we have in the culture is that how you just articulated your top list, okay, is the at the core of why we have these conversations, because in a way it's us expressing our personalities, expressing our own histories, expressing the moments in our development, in our coming of age stories that
Yes.
were shaped by the soundtrack of these stories.
Yes.
And that's why the culture is the culture, and it's so important. So now he just stunned it all on my list. Look, okay, so 5. Look, right? Because I got StreamYard control. Look, 5 would be LL Cool J, and I always make sure. And I listen, Dr. T. I don't think I gave him this direction, or request. But when we cite our top 5 or top 10 or whatever, we're required to cite their magnum opus in our opinion.
Oh, I can't.
Right? Now, it's not, obviously it's very subjective. Okay? And that's a source of other arguments and conflicts. But see, the third verse, you missed the double entendre. Okay. All right. So 5, LL Cool J, magnum opus, Radio, Rock the Bells, Knock You Out. 4, of course, Nice.
Oh, you pick. I
Right.
didn't know you wanted. Okay, I didn't pick enough songs. I just went with the artist, but I see you.
No,
Okay.
I mean, so this is just me. The way you did it was perfect. The
Okay.
way you did it was perfect, and the way that you presented it, and the connection was brilliant. I feel almost sheepish putting my five up, which is the
No.
point. You're
No.
see this is for those who are not of the culture. You don't understand what's happening right. This is a cipher. We're ciphering right now, and in that presenting an exchange of knowledge and information that's tied to the culture. You see how the culture feeds, right? And we return what we have digested and synthesized back to the culture, because this is part of that expansion. Okay. Opus, God's son made you look one mic. People will argue it, but argue with your mama. Number three, none other than Jay-Z. Lots of conversations around this artist here and the billionaire tag, what that means for the culture and the greater society. Is this supposed to be like this? Were some other artists and contributors to this culture able to survive, their transitions? What would this dynamic even look like? A billionaire rapper, right? Magnum opus, in my opinion, the blueprint. Song crying Izzo. Okay. Number two, none other than Biggie Smalls. For so many reasons. And okay, so I am Midwest to my core. All right. So, family reunions. My mom's side is from Greenville, Mississippi. And my dad's side is from Marshall, Texas. And we go back, many generations, 8 on both sides. Okay. But I'm Midwest to the core. So I love some Bone Thugs and Harmony, of course, Kanye. Well, now the old Kanye, straight from the go Kanye. I don't know about that new Kanye. I don't know what to do with that Kanye. Anyway.
Yeah, the first couple albums, Kanye. Yeah.
Listen, you want to talk about genius, okay?
Yeah,
you want to talk about brilliance, but the ability to capture a moment and to present it in a way that is so impactful, but becomes the soundtrack of a generation, right? Magnum opus, Ready to Die, Juicy, Big Papa. Listen, I mean,
Biggie was so seductive in the sense that, like, when you first heard him, it might have been in a club on the radio station, and he had those bangers, and it was like, okay, this is cool. And then you mess around and turn on and play the album, and the stuff that wouldn't get on the radio, but just the lyricism, it was like, God damn.
Yes. Yes. When we talk about the reflection of the culture. So in another conversation, I talked about what you had to acquire in the hood as a young man growing up. Okay. If you decided to come outside, if you decided to jump off the porch, there were certain things that you were required to develop, right? You had to develop your ability to defend yourself and your family. You had to develop your own personal style. You got to stay fresh to death. Even though you didn't have anything, a plain white t-shirt, a pair of pants that had to be clean and ironed.
Right,
okay?
right.
You bet not flood. You bet not flood. Listen. and your outfit may not have costed more than $10. But it was the cleanest, most presentable piece, and you styled it in a way that was unique to you, to your personality, to your personal expression. You would put a ladder here. You would put something on the sleeve for your shoes. We kept the tag on, especially for the hat. People don't realize. They were like, why do black folks keep the tags on their stuff? Because we stay fresh to death. Listen. I love it. I
learned that, but I learned that at the same time I learned my scent game.
Oh, watch out. Look at
Brother, nobody prepared, none of the old heads prepared me for what happens when you get your scent game. And I'm not talking about expensive colognes, because just like you said, when I was 16, I couldn't go buy a $150 bottle or whatever. It might have
Correct.
been incense that I was messing with. But I'm gonna tell you this: when I went to Philly to do my master's at Temple, I ran into a woman that said she would make me what do you call it, a signature scent. Yeah, she was selling
Yeah.
what you call it, incense and whatnot, but she sold oils. So she
Yes.
made me a signature scent, right?
Oh,
And so I got to wearing it, and I got so deep in it, brother, I would pour it on a sock and put it in the dryer so it would get all
uh-oh.
my clothes. Come on, man. You
Yes.
know what it
Yes.
is.
What you
You
know
know
about
what I
that?
mean? I put it in the lotion bottle. So when I put the lotion on out the showers, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so I was dating this woman. I'll be real quick. Dating this woman,
Go for it,
and
please.
I had to go out of town for something. And long story short, when I get back, she stole like 3 of my shirts and
Indeed.
wouldn't wash them. And her thing was, she was just like, you were gonna be gone. I needed to smell you. And now, mind you, nobody prepared me for what happens when you get your scent together. So I was sitting there like stupefied, like, what is she talking about? Let's just say there were passions unlocked that I did not know were unlocked that way. I just put it that way.
Yes, listen, this is that ism. This is that ism. We talk about the signature sin of
There you
seduction.
go. There you go.
Enchanté, the ASP Holy Ghost, available at theseductionscriptures.com. We have the scent boosting mineral oil. Now, for those mothers who sold Avon, you know what skin so soft is, okay? Part of our rituals, and we're going to get to the first. Look, I'm building up anticipation for the number one, right? Part of our rituals growing up as children has to do with, first of all, depending on how many kids were in your family, you were lined up according to height before you were allowed to leave. You had to pass inspection, okay? Because you wasn't about to embarrass nobody coming out to this house. And then you had to hold the jar of Vaseline and get the oil rubbed upon your face and scalp. You know, and this goes back to what I'm referring to as the hood, the term hood, okay, the nomenclature of the hood as a veil, because we were practicing sacred rituals even then. The anointing of the oil on the
Mhm.
scalp of the children before leaving the house. And then we had words of inspiration whispered to us. I'm going to
Mhm.
say inspiration now, but you know those words, right? When they lean into you close and say, "You bet not embarrass this family. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't embarrass your family.
That's right. That's right.
Make us proud."
Right.
Now on to the next kid, the same thing. It was just
Mhm.
communion every
Mhm.
morning. But these were the rituals that sent us out into the world. That was, we didn't even understand that the chaos of the ecosystems that we existed in. Yet we not only survived, but we took with us the lessons. We took with us the essence of the mojo spirit, right? Some people refer to it as mojara, right? We're going to touch upon jazz briefly. Hopefully I have you for a little bit longer, but there are elements in jazz that are so special, so unique. But without further ado, I have to cite number one for yours truly, cousin T-Taw, is none other than Tupac. Listen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You want to talk about somebody who embodies
Yeah.
the Black radical tradition of
Right.
resistance,
Mhm.
right? You mentioned you say your dad was a Panther.
Mhm.
Okay, obviously, his parents, right? We know the history, we know the lore, we know when he spoke at various events.
Mhm.
We know
Mhm.
all of these things. When we talk about the criterion that I
Mhm.
spoke of, that when we talk about the goat, we have the goat conversation. It's not something that we take lightly. Okay, just like a card game. Okay, we don't take these things lightly. Okay,
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, in the beginning of the next, these are the people who represent us, who represent the culture, but also represent that flame
Mhm.
that represents the essence of our creative expression. and this continuum that reaches back across generations. We can't have weak representation. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, for me, humbly, I present number one, Tupac Shakur, magnum opus Illuminati, me and my girlfriend and dear mama. Now, somebody said that they played a horn. Uh-oh.
No. Let's be clear.
All
You
right.
know what? I'm trying to learn. Here's the thing. Ever since Mo Better Blues came out,
Yes.
because when I
Classic.
was a kid, the kids would carry instruments to school. My mother we couldn't afford it when I came of
Mm.
age. My sister kind of got it because she's a few years behind me, but I never got to learn an instrument. And
Mm.
so when Mo Better came out and I'm watching Denzel with this trumpet, I was like,
Yes.
I want to learn how to play a trumpet, but I'm going through graduate school and doctorates and family, and I never got a chance to learn. But I
Okay.
love the trumpet. I don't know how to play it,
Ah,
but I love it. So when you say you got that background, I'm like, damn, there
ah.
it is.
Yeah.
There it is.
Listen, I write, I read, I have original compositions and all that fun stuff. So we were ready to have that conversation because in order to teach, so real briefly, I taught with Chicago Public Schools, not as a teacher,
Right.
but there was a doctor who was a former CEO of Chicago Public Schools. His name was Dr. Philip Jackson. Dr. Philip Jackson. He transitioned in 2018.
Mm.
He started what was called the Black Stars Project, in which they invited former CPS students back to the classrooms to mentor and to teach.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, it was brilliant. It was wonderful. So I had an
Mhm.
opportunity to connect in that way, but you had to put together a lesson plan. You had to put together, your own curriculum. But
Mhm.
like I said, you had to be thorough. You had to be honest and accurate. And so I had to go into the history. I had to go into the structure, right? Now that has expanded over the years, right? When we talk about jazz as a language. But before I do that, lastly, and I hope this, I know you've had this conversation, but I hope to have this conversation in the future. Hip hop as a technology. Hip hop
Mm.
as a technology, rhythmic hieroglyphics. Okay.
Mm.
I present that as such because there is an encoding and decoding that happens with
Mhm.
the cipher, with lyricisms, with how we, the audience and culture, engage with it, right?
Mhm.
Certain themes and ideas and thoughts are woven into the lyrics and the metaphors. And then as the listeners, we decode it, right? And as a part of our communion, right, within the culture, we practice understanding what the artist meant when they composed those lyrics. So hip hop as a technology, I present that to you as a gift. It's yours.
Okay.
So real quick, top five. And if you have this, fantastic. If not, if you've got three or however many, I understand. Now, my list comes from not only living, breathing, sleeping, eating, traveling. I've played blues fest. I've played
Mm.
jazz fest. I've played jazz fest in Connecticut. I've played at different clubs. Cambridge, Massachusetts, and different places. So my list comes from really, really embodying and engaging with the tradition and the culture in terms of engaging other artists, musicians, and teachers
Mm.
teachers, historians, and those who try to keep the tradition alive, the continuum pure, and the language relevant, right? So I'll do it in the other order. Number one, of course, Miles Davis. Anybody who makes it to the cover, he made multiple covers of Playboy magazine, okay, internationally, because this
Yeah.
was a cool dude. He was complex and all that good stuff. He's the man. He's my
Yep.
favorite artist across domains, across disciplines.
Mm.
Miles Davis. Number two, of course, is the father of jazz. Okay, Louis Armstrong. Now they're modern documentaries citing others who were there at the time. But when we
Mm-hmm.
talk about, and this factors into when I talk about the top five, right, or top
Mm-hmm.
10 of a domain. I've done concerts, right? Concert
Mm-hmm.
production, security management, stadium series, 70,000 people. You know, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Taylor Swift, Metallica. Throw the names out there: AC/DC, U2, all of that in Chicago and Minneapolis and New York. Huge productions. So I know what it means to be able to perform when the stage is too big and the lights are too bright.
Mm-hmm.
Not every artist can do that. A
Yeah.
lot of people fold. A lot of people are, just simply don't have it within them. They can be super talented. They can be super insightful, but never make it to, the stage and the lights. So these gentlemen, these artists, were able to do that over a period of time and make the
Mm-hmm.
impacts. And like you said, I love how you put it with Rakim, changing the dynamic in the very way and the cadence in which a art is performed. That's insane, and that's seminal. So
Mm-hmm.
Louis Armstrong's number 2. At 3, I've got John Coltrane. Absolutely. 4 is Duke Ellington. The bag is so deep. Okay, when we
Yeah.
talk about having a bag, the depth of creativity and expressionality. Okay, that's what of course, when
Mm-hmm.
we say bag, Duke Ellington's bag is unlike anyone else's. Of
Indeed.
course, Thelonious Monk. Now, his level of genius. Remember, I don't throw that word around
Mm-hmm.
lightly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so part of my independent studies has to do with the nature of consciousness itself. Okay, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about, that's a whole other conversation in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about how an artist is able to bring ideas and structures into this reality, we're talking about accessing pocket dimensions
Mm.
of reality, alternative realities. We're talking about quantum type stuff, right?
Communicated
So
through vibration and frequency. Yeah.
there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Thelonious Monk. Thelonious
Mm-hmm.
is that guy. And when we talk about the cultural lore, so now we've mentioned, I would say, three geniuses in this conversation. We mentioned Dr. Tommy Curry, we mentioned Kanye West, and now we're mentioning Thelonious Monk. In my opinion, my humble opinion,
Mm-hmm.
those who have the ability to pull from alternative realms of consciousness
Mm.
and then present it, hold on to it, capture it,
Mm-hmm.
hold on to it, translate it, and present it in this realm.
Yeah.
Brilliance. Okay, a level of brilliance that is not shared by many people. So,
there's nothing on that list I would debate with. Only thing is, I wanted to say I also listened to a young brother named his name's Christian Scott, and I
yes,
really
Ajua
enjoy.
Atunde.
Man, please,
Ajua Atunde. Yes.
that brother is. I've been listening to him since he was a teenager. He did a song with Brother Jay from X Clan.
Oh,
When
really?
he did, I'm pretty sure it's his very first album. He was a teenager. He couldn't have been more than 16.
Yeah.
Did a
Right.
song with
Right.
Brother Jay, and that's what put him on my map. And man, phenomenal brother, man, phenomenal.
Yeah, and he Christian Scott along with Robert Glasper.
Come on, man.
You know,
Come on.
yeah.
Robert makes no sense, man. That cat is brilliant. He is, man. Wow.
Yeah.
Glasper is no
Yeah.
joke. And anybody diverse enough to hook up with MF Doom and perform a jazz piece with come on, man. I love Robert Glasper's work.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, when you talk about cultural cross pollination, right?
Yes.
That's,
Yes.
To hold that standard, but to also speak to the tradition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of the discipline. He is the man. Robert Glasper is definitely.
Yeah, he does. He did a few pieces with one of my other favorites, Michel and Degiacello.
Yes.
I mean, Glasper's off the chain, man.
Yes. So I was just going through a couple things. I was going to do this, but I think that we've pretty much established what we're discussing in terms of the culture, how it feeds us, and how we return the favor by expanding and expounding on the conversation and passing it down to the next generation. I think that that
Mhm.
has a lot to do with why we're here, right? What
Mhm.
does it mean to be a human being beyond a human doing? We are, in my sort of presentations, I say that we've stepped into the era of human meaning
Mhm.
because of what modern technologies are presenting and doing. Agentic AI presenting the erosion of thought and the outsourcing of cognitive functionality, right? Um,
But this is
so,
this is what's interesting about that, because if you take it back to jazz, we can talk about the innovation of instrumentation over the years. And one
yeah,
of the things I've always appreciated is when artists would take a new instrument or a new sound, whether you're talking about Ray Charles or Miles Davis, and they
yes,
did something with it that, one, it, not only was it not designed for, and nobody imagined it could be used that way, they would elevate it to another
yes.
level. So my question is, when you start talking about AI,
Hmm.
it's not just the existence of it. It's more a question of what happens if AI is in the hands of a Miles Davis, just like a new trumpet. It's what is possible. Like there was a while, I want to say it was like a year or two ago, and I think they got rid of all those songs because I think they got sued. But there were all these reimaginings of popular blues and hip hop tracks, but they were done in different genres. 1960s
Yes,
R&B or 1970s funk, and the
right,
creativity of it was great, but it wasn't just the AI execution. It was the people who were asking the questions. Can we
right,
take Dear Mama and put it in a 1960s framework and then add production to it? The creativity and the breadth of it was impressive.
right.
But I would never just say let AI run with it. I look at it like you remember when Ray Charles would get a new keyboard that
Yeah,
would it sound like nothing else, but what he would do with it, nobody else could do. My
yeah.
question
Him
is,
and
what
him
happens
and D
when
Funk too.
those geniuses can play with new instrumentation and new technology?
Yes, and I would say there would need to be a component of the programming language at that level because of the inherent biases of
Hmm.
the data scientists and the current sort of core of computer scientists who have tuned the current agentic systems that exist. They exist with a lot of biases and with a dearth of
Hmm.
sort of original thoughts and ideas from
Right,
certain demographics, and
right.
that affects the system's ability to more comprehensively express a sort of synthetic version of creative expression. So, and I hesitate to use that word creative.
Well,
Um, but
I've heard similar arguments when the '90s era of hip hop came through. Well, it was really kind of '80s and '90s. You remember the sampling era?
mhm,
And one of the
brilliant.
arguments I used to hear my parents' generation make is that there was no instrumentation, which wasn't untrue because by the time we came up, a lot of school systems cut, they cut a lot of that out of the budget.
Yes,
So,
live instrumentation.
even though in the '70s and '80s you might have gotten some instrumentation, by the time we came to school, it wasn't the same. So, a lot of us sampled, but I tried to explain this to my father at one point. The sampling got to a level of genius
Yes,
that a lot of people didn't understand. This is one of the reasons I love DJ Premier so much. He would sample from jazz. A lot of the
yes,
jazz I was introduced to came through hip hop.
yes.
I didn't really have a straight introduction to jazz. My grandfather listened to jazz, but he passed before he could pass that on to me. I was introduced to it through DJ Premier. And it made
Mm,
me want to go look, where did that sound come from? What Thelonious Monk? Like that was but the same thing happened with funk. I mean, P
yes.
Funk, I learned about P Funk. I used to hear the tracks directly from Atomic Dog, whatever, but
Mhm.
there were artists like X Clan that delved so deep into the crates. that my first P-Funk concert, I knew all the songs. And I hadn't listened to P-Funk's albums. I had listened to X-Clan. And so,
Right.
but what I'm saying is they actually use sampling in such a technical way, especially when you talk about the Bomb Squad and Public Enemy.
Mhm.
It was not just, contrary to popular opinion, they didn't just take a sample and loop it and everybody just rhymed over the sample. It got so intricate and artistic. It became a language unto itself. And
Yes.
then, of course, all the lawsuits, it went into effect, and everybody had to kind of find new ways to present the music. But I'm just saying, there's so much potential there when you talk about how human creativity can use technology. It's just a question of, and I think this is where you were going with it. You can't let technology govern the conversation. It can't supersede human creativity. Otherwise, you just get replication from a machine.
Right.
But I heard similar critiques about different generations using technology in certain ways, and the question usually came down to, is this going to supersede creativity? And for some people it did, and those were not the people we tend to remember. The people we tend to remember are the ones who used it, but their creativity stayed in the director's seat, as it were. And those are the ones that stay with, they become timeless. I mean, we're still talking about, you said, I mean, Tupac is your first, Rakim was mine. These cats are from 30, 40 years ago in terms of,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And the reason we're still talking about them is because their work has become timeless.
Yes.
So anyway, sorry, just had to
And,
add
well, no, brilliant, obviously a brilliant observation. And I would say, I would add to that the necessity for the parallel, because even though, instruments were defunded and removed from a lot of inner city or public schools, those traditions still existed in
Yeah.
those clubs. Part of the rites of passage in Chicago, and they stopped this around 2000, the 99 and 2000. In Chicago, as a high school student, if you were in a band, you could bring your instrument and get access to a jazz club, any jazz club.
What?
Because because your band instructor was more than likely playing at a club, the club scene locally. Okay, this is Chicago. This is a wonderful tradition. We want to talk about the continuum, right? The ritual was, this is another ritual for those who are taking count of the rituals we've broken down in this conversation. You can be 15, 14, 15 years old. Bring your instrument, obviously in your box, or if you play the drums, bring your drumsticks. You could not enter through the front door. You had to go in through the side or through the kitchen, which was the same route that the Black artists who were marquee, had the names on the marquee, had to take. So we were made to take those same routes that those jazz giants, those timeless artists, had to take because of segregation, because of Jim Crow, because of those eras. But because we were making that same sort of entry, and when we were brought into the establishment through the kitchen or whatever, and they sat us in the front row, and we had a master class and a music education. So partly they sat us in the front row because they can keep an eye on the minors that are in the building, but you couldn't pay for the type of master class that we had, the interplay that's on stage, the dialogue, the trading floors, all of those things, the colors, the phrasing, all of the aspects of the culture. They allowed us to do that. That was a Chicago tradition from the 60s until like the end of the 90s, and they stopped allowing that. So whenever I do build that center, that music center, that's going to be a prominent part of the construction. So I say that to say that the advent of agentic systems can be a wonderful tool and technological sort of boon to multi-domain sort of cultural activities. But I will always say that there is a need to keep the live aspect of it alive. And so when you mentioned digging in the crates, We talk about Jay Dilla, you talk about DJ Premier, you talk about all of these brilliant producers that are now getting, their sort of discographies unpacked online, and people are now disseminating those tracks. They're separating those tracks listings, and they say, "Oh, listen to this isolated
Hmm.
sound right here.
Hmm.
Notice how he drags this." I mean, when you
Right,
listen,
right,
I
right,
mean,
right,
come on, man.
right.
So, but at the same time, we still had funk bands, we still had jazz bands, we still had
Hmm.
live instrumentation, maintaining that continuum.
Hmm.
The concern is that continues as well as the progressions made into the artificial space, into the synthetic space. That's pretty much the only concern I would say. But
Hmm.
there also needs to be a broader corpus of cultural sort of examples
Hmm.
and programming input into the foundational models of these agentic systems. That will
Yeah,
be the other critique.
I think.
Shout out. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to shout out Afro Merchant.
What's good, man?
Salute you for the fan. Salute to my favorite cousin and favorite doc. Like, share, subscribe. Absolutely. Happy Father's Day to all of the
Hmm.
people who are supporting this message. Make sure that you bless the Cash App to support Dr. T's work. That's scrolling at the bottom of your screen right now. I'm sorry. So go ahead.
Oh, thank you. No, I was gonna say when I teach, I only get to teach my hip hop class once a year in the spring, and when I do, there's a segment of it where we deal with spirituality and hip hop, and
Mm,
it's not just different religious groups. We do listen to that. We do, talk about that, but also what I try to do with them is really to get them to understand how much breadth the tradition is in terms of those of us who produced this culture, this music. I try to get the breadth. So I give you an example. I teach them how to meditate through
mm.
listening to hip hop. So we have sessions in the class where there are tracks that I'll put up, say from DJ Premier, for as a matter of fact, and I'll just put it on repeat and I tell them how to breathe, and we'll do that for 10, 15 minutes, and they're just minds blown. And so what I'm trying to say to them is you can listen to the music, you can enjoy it, you can bump it in your car, all good, but do not underestimate the breadth of what was being produced and still can be and still is, depending on where you find it. But there's so much more here than what played on the radio. So much
Yeah.
more here than who got gold or diamond selling albums. There was a lot communicated. I mean, when I was coming up, there was everything from how to spit game to being a vegetarian to political
Yes.
ideology to religious. I mean, there
Yes.
was so much being pumped through it,
Yes.
all at once. And so now I get people that are just concerned with, well, how did it sell? And I'm looking at them like,
Mm.
that wasn't even a question we gave a damn about. I mean, to me, I didn't care if folks didn't like Public Enemy or if they did. I was there to take notes. You know what I
Yes.
mean? The first time I really heard of Farrakhan was because of Public Enemy. I mean, if you didn't come up in Chicago or New York,
Right.
or LA, where these central hubs where a lot was going on, hip hop was the way you heard about a lot of this.
Yes.
Khalid Muhammad, we can go down the list of people that most of us probably wouldn't have had a chance to hear about unless you were tied in and you kind of got it through these different. I mean, even Kwame Ture, KRS One was cutting them up on albums. So
Mm.
that introduced. So this is a person that is one of the founding members of SNCC and was in the Black Panther Party. But you had a whole generation of people being introduced to him through KRS One, who
Right.
would play clips of his lectures on his album. I mean, people don't really think about the breadth of what hip hop has been doing over the years, and personally, I love it. So I just kind of I try to get the students to kind of broaden their thinking a little bit. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, and that's brilliant. If you can, because I did not know that you had that you published a book on hip hop. I would love to have a copy of that. If is it on Amazon or?
I believe it is. I believe it is. Let me see. She don't have me lying about the name. Let me go back and get it.
Fair enough. While you pull that up, make sure that everybody who's listening to this conversation, make sure that you like, share, subscribe, forward this conversation to someone who you know can benefit from this ism. Make sure that you bless the good doctor's work via his Cash App that's scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Also, take a look at his website, which has a plethora of media options to dive deeper into his work. Now, while you pull it up, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I have this book here, hip hop. Let's see, hip hop as performance and ritual. I think this is a wonderful book by Dr. William E. Smith, who is
Mm.
ethnographer. Are you familiar with his work?
Yeah, I'm from Dr. Smith. He's my boy. Yeah.
Okay, you know him. Okay, you
Yeah.
know him. So you know his other work, Jazz as a Language.
You know what? You know what? I need to double check because William Smith is a common name. The brother I know, Dr. William Smith, came up with microaggressions. So I don't
Oh,
know
okay.
if it's the same
Okay.
William Smith.
Okay.
You know, because that's that's the name William Smith is.
Yeah.
It might it's a little so it
Kind of
might be a
common.
different cat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, but that when you mentioned that book on hip hop, definitely I would love to get a copy of that because there's so much, and this is why it's referred to as a foundational renaissance. There's so much that's coming out, so much being sort of dug into in terms of what has gone into the culture historically that had been missed in lieu of the shiny things, in lieu
mhm,
of the numbers, in lieu of production, right? And as
mhm,
people are starting to limit the time that they doom scroll, so to speak, and to really focus in on reality
yeah,
and the sort of analog version of the human experience, all of these treasures are being revised and further unpacked. And so, we don't use that word Renaissance lightly because there's this renewal, there is this expansion of consciousness. So,
when you wrote about it in your email and you mentioned it, I asked you more what you meant because I didn't know if you were talking about the Harlem Renaissance era or now. But as you explained more about what you were talking about, the first thing that came to mind to me is the Renaissance that Black men are having right now,
yes, indeed.
and that you and I are a part of online as we speak. What we've been doing up here. You're absolutely right, man. It's a renaissance, and I'm seeing a shift with Black
Mm-hmm.
men I've never seen. Matter of fact, I'll give you just a brief example. Even today, I saw
Mm-hmm.
an example of this renaissance that I've never seen before. I probably had no less than 75 Happy Father's Day greetings sent directly to me or included me, in a list
Wow.
online where they were.
Yeah.
Come on, man. You and I are old enough to know when we grew up, did you
Right.
ever see this amount of love extended
No.
to Black men?
No.
Never,
Yeah. It's beautiful.
never. No.
Yeah.
I got people that I didn't even think were speaking to me anymore that are sending me texts talking about Happy Father's Day. And I'll say we need to take credit for it. It's a product of how much Black men have
Yeah.
been kicking the door down in terms of no longer being silent about the things we were taught we were supposed to be silent about. But look, if I said this a few years ago, I kind of slowed up on making videos for the last couple of years. I was doing one video every couple months. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason I slowed up is because younger cats were coming into the space and I wanted to see what they were talking about, and I thought maybe the kind of things I talk about are passe. So I said, let me just shut up. Let me hear what's going on. Let me see what direction it's moving in. And one of the things I noticed is, and it made me tear up. I was on Twitter, and there was yet another person talking mess about Black men. It was a
Mm-hmm.
Black woman, I think she was a therapist and whatever, and so she was, calling Black men bullet bags and whatever. So I'm getting ready to get up and argue with her like I've done 1,000 times. And before I could hit the first key, 10 brothers rolled up in there and challenged her.
There you go.
I had never seen that
Fantastic.
before. I'd
Right.
never seen that before. And then it happened again. And then it happened again. And I said, something is actually happening here. Black men are not just sitting down and taking it. And then you start to hear about Black men traveling the world. And
Yes.
and I'm just like, the only time I heard Black men talking about traveling when I was younger was in the military,
Military. Yes.
or if they were athletes that somehow played internationally. But you know what I mean? But the whole conversation is changing. And I think the way you're framing it in terms of a renaissance is appropriate. But it's just
No. Absolutely.
nobody attributes that to us, but it's happening.
Yes. Yes, and it's usually sort of posthumous observation, and people are
Mm.
digging. Oh, look at what happened in the 2020s. Oh, look at the.
Mhm.
Oh,
Mhm.
wow. So,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
before before we go any further, I have to make mention of Dr.
Ah.
Johnson's participation. So when we talk about the current renaissance that's happening, this is multimedia, multi-dimensional and domain information and media that's coming out. Those who are familiar with this, Buck Breaking, that's a wonderful contribution that the good doctor made. I would love to have other conversations about Black pedagogy. I know
Mm.
that's something that you're very passionate about.
Mhm.
Um, Especially the way we think, not only how we learn, but the way that we think and express reality. But and I know that you do movie reviews, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and before we wrap, I want you to let people know what the most recent movie review you're going to do, or that you're preparing right now. Have you seen that movie, Disclosure Day?
I have. I have. I've
Okay.
seen Disclosure Day. I didn't do a review of it, but I did see it. Let me see. What else? I saw a few things, but I do what I do on my Patreon is we get together and review films on the 1st and 15th. On the 1st, I try to do something a little newer. On the 15th, I kind of go with a classic. So, what are we in? So, I think June. So June 1st, I think we hold on. My bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 15th week we did She Hate Me, Spike Lee's film, She Hate.
Mm,
So we reviewed that and kind of looked into that. And I think on the first we did One Night in Miami. So every 2 weeks on the 1st and 15th we review a film. But the space allows me to be, who I am. I mean, I'm a geek. I love sci-fi. I like movies, and I actually do that in my work, in my classes. If I'm talking about it online, I'm talking about it in my classes. So we're
mm,
reviewing films. We're doing all the same stuff in my classes, but to be able to do it with adult Black men in a private setting, the conversation, as you know, can go much
mm.
further. You know what I mean? Than it would go elsewhere. But yeah, so I do a lot of that. As you can see, comic book nerd, all of that good stuff. Um,
Hmm.
all the swords are they're lethal, but they're also beautiful. So it is what it is. Um,
Yeah. Did you ever do a breakdown of what the names and what they're from? Like, oh, there's like movie props or.
Yeah, well, yeah, I never actually did one though. And there are more that are higher up than my camera is showing, but yeah, they're most of them come out of. It's not always movies. Sometimes it's cartoons. Sometimes it's shows.
Okay, gotcha.
But yeah, but stuff that I mean, this was the stuff in the '80s that you couldn't get your hands on. It didn't like when I watched Conan the Barbarian as a kid. I always wanted that sword. You could never find it.
Right.
When I saw
Yeah.
Wesley Snipes' blade, I wanted that sword, and then one day someone gave it to me as a gift, and that set off this whole
Wow.
addiction. Oh yeah, it's the top one up there. That blade sword is perfect, and it's exactly like it is in the movie. But that started me. I got addicted to it. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
No, it's a impressive collection. And before we get out of here,
Mm,
this is why I asked you about Disclosure Day. I am hosting, not presenting in a webinar that's happening next Friday.
mm.
Uh, so when I present for webinars, I always make it a hip hop theme, right?
Ah, okay.
And I try to tie it in that way. This particular webinar is covering the topic, what is life? The
Mm,
holy grail of being. And basically for the last few, I'd say maybe 3 or 4 webinars, I've been going further in depth about what a post-singularity society looks like, how we are transitioning and expanding, and this splintering of
mhm,
realities in terms of how people organize life, how people define what it means to be, and just the meaning of the human sort of avatar going forward. And so that's something that's coming up. And of course, we're going to touch on the disclosure day, or the era of
okay.
disclosure that we're living in right now. But for those who know, the associated links will be down post conversation. But before we wrap
You do
this,
that. You do that every month, or is that frequent?
Ron Wills hosts a monthly webinar. I have the privilege of presenting, maybe once a quarter or a couple times.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple
Okay.
times because he has different presenters. BGS is one of the presenters every now
Yeah.
and again as well. So it's a
Okay.
fun time. It's a raw conversation. If you're a
Hmm.
conspiracy theorist, make sure that you bring your tinfoil hat, bring your tinfoil kufi,
Damn.
Stetson, your tinfoil fitted cap,
Damn.
because we go deep. We do the deep dive into the esoteric. But
Okay.
I really thank you for your time, and I appreciate your insights and your wonderful experience and what you have taken from the culture and what you add to the culture. Hopefully we can have other conversations, definitely about hip hop, and argue who the GOAT is and for what reason going forward. But salute to you. Like I said, all of the information in regards to Dr. T. Hasan Johnson's works, projects, channels, and how you can bless his ministry is scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Before we go
Much
out, here's another
appreciated.
one. Afro Merchant.
Oh, shout out to you. Appreciate you, Afro Merchant.
Sawbuck, brothers, appreciate you, Dr. T. Your efforts don't go unnoticed. Keep up the great work. So
Thank
we're
you.
going to take the good doctor out with his theme music. Absolutely. And as always, this is your man, Cousin T, a.k.a. the Alpha Wingman, saying stay sharp and mission focused. Later.